We the ones they talking about.
Broadway Sports Media.
Choose your fighter.
Justin and Justin Titans podcast show.
Some of it was bad, but hopefully you probably piece something together.
Outstanding.
There's an earthquake in the middle of the podcast. Unbelievable.
We're begging for listeners. That's all we do.
We all we got. Hey, Titans on three. 1, 2, 3.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Music City Audible podcast presented by Broadway Sports Media in partnership with 440 Sports. I'm Justin Graver. With me, as always, Justin Melo. And today, the plan was to talk about how Tim Kelly's offense will look different from what we saw with the Titans under Todd Downing the last couple seasons. We recorded the majority of this episode last week, so both of us are on vacation right now. We decided to hop on for a few minutes because some major news broke, and if you somehow missed it, I'm sure you did not. DeAndre Hopkins is officially a Tennessee Titan. He has announced his intention. I don't know if he put pen to paper technically as of this new recording, but he's going to be a Tennessee Titan for this season and the next. We reacted to this in an emergency podcast that dropped yesterday, so if you missed that and all our thoughts on how Hopkins changes the offense and fits in Tennessee, go listen to that podcast. However, we recorded that right away, before we even had contract details, which came out pretty dang quick. So let us know what you think the offense could be. What are the biggest changes going to be under Tim Kelly? Drop it in the comments below. If you're watching us on YouTube, we really appreciate it. Subscribe to that YouTube channel. We're trying to grow, and the best way to help us grow is to comment on all of our episodes multiple times. As many comments as you can think of. Comment all of them. And if you're just listening on to the podcast version, head over to YouTube and help us out. Justin, hello. How's it going? How's your vacation going? I hope it's going well. And let's talk about the contract here for Hopkins because we didn't have time to get to that in our emergency pod. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Hopefully the vacation's going well. I hope. By the time this drops, will I be there yet? I leave today, which is Monday, July 17th. I leave in still a few 10. I leave 10 hours from now. My flight actually got delayed. I got a text, but I leave in about 10 hours. But this is our dedication. We had to get on here. We had to talk about this. I mean, I didn't, one thing that hurts me, by the way, I didn't find out until an hour after it happened. I don't even know how. I'm always looking at my phone. The one day I put my phone away for 1 hour. I was out with my partner. We were downtown Toronto. We were eating lunch together, her and I, and put the phone away to eat lunch, spend time on our date. Valuable lesson learned. Always ignore your partner for your phone, because I pulled out my phone 1 hour later after our lunch was over, and I had I've got Twitter notifications on for a bunch of accounts, so I always have a ton of Twitter notifications, and I saw one tweet. I think it was the Doug Keed one. I think he's the one that broke it. That said DeAndre Hopkins is going to be a Tennessee Titan. And I'm like, I lost my mind in the restaurant. I told two of the waiters that the season's back on. DeAndre Hopkins just signed with the Tennessee Titans. They looked at me like I was out of my goddamn mind. They had no idea what I was talking about. But it was very exciting. It was a very exciting moment. It got me, and I shouldn't get into this now because I want to talk about the deal, but it got me thinking, as a Titans fan, when was the last time something like this was happening? They were chasing a player and he didn't end up a Titan, right? Like the Jadeveon Clowney sweepstakes, the Julio Jones sweepstakes, and now the DeAndre Hopkins sweepstakes. I mean, you probably got to go back to the Peyton Manning time, right, when he chose the Broncos over the Titans. So think about one like this. Now, obviously, hopefully this one works out better than Jadeveon Clowney and Julio. Hopefully it works out as well as Peyton Manning to the Broncos did, right? Like, that's what you want to see. But it's a very exciting time, I think, to be a Titans fan. To me, it totally reshapes my expectations for the 2023 season. I don't think I'm getting way ahead of myself. I don't think anyone's getting ahead of themselves. I don't necessarily think they're going to win a Super Bowl or be Super Bowl favorites, and not to poop on the parade. That's I still think the Kansas City Chiefs are a better football team, Buffalo Bills in the AFC. But I do think this puts them in postseason contention. I think this puts them right there, neck and neck, essentially, with the Jaguars as AFC South favorites.
Yeah, I agree. The Titans and Jaguars played for the division in the last game of the season last year. The Titans almost won with Josh Dobbs after having him play for multiple weeks. Malik Willis had to play multiple weeks. If the Titans can stay healthy, they should win the AFC South. Now, I don't know that they will. Even if they do stay healthy, the ball bounces in weird ways sometimes, and the Jags could take a huge step. We'll see what happens. But
yeah, I'm still not as confident as you there, only because I don't like thinking back to saying, oh, well, they were playing for the division. I think Trevor Lawrence probably takes another step. Calvin Ridley has a chance to be a pretty big game changer for them. Some of those young defensive guys, Trayvon Walker, Devin Lloyd, maybe they take steps as well. So we'll see. But I'm not saying the Titans are way beneath them. I think it's essentially neck and neck. I just stopped short of saying favorites, I think.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. All right, let's get into this contract here because now here's the thing about it. We have the numbers, but we don't have the year-by-year breakdown. We don't have the cap hits. This stuff has not come out yet, and the Titans may or may not have to make a restructuring move here to fit these cap hits under their, the salary cap this season. And if they do, we'll talk about that probably on our next episode, which you won't be here for, but I will be here. Maybe I'll get a guest. Maybe I'll do it solo. I haven't decided yet. We'll see what happens. But that'll be next week's podcast. We'll definitely have the contract details by then. For now, we do have the numbers. So it's officially a 2-year deal worth $26 million with an additional $6 million in potential incentives, $3 million per year. So 2-year deal, $13 million per year average with an additional $3 million per year in incentives. And here are those incentive numbers really quickly. I'm going to run through it. So if he reaches 95 catches for 1,050 yards and 10 touchdowns, all three of those numbers in both seasons, he will make all $6 million of those incentives. But they're laddered. So $250,000 bonus for 65 catches, $500,000 for 75 catches, $750,000 for 85 catches, $1 million for 95 catches. The same thing with the yards. It's laddered like that. The same thing with the touchdowns. And every single one of these incentives is considered not likely to be earned, which means that it won't count against the Titans' cap because Hopkins didn't hit any of these incentives in his previous season. And that's how it works. Not likely to be earned. Only looks at one previous season. Did they hit those targets? If not, it's not likely to be earned. If it's likely to be earned, it will count against your cap whether or not they hit the incentive. But this is considered not likely to be earned. So that $6 million in incentives won't count against the cap at all. We'll see how they structure it. Are they going to add void years to lower the year one cap hit? Is it going to be like a $10 million cap hit year one? If so, they'll need to restructure probably Harold Landry or Kevin Byard or somebody's contract. So we're going to have to wait to see how that shakes out. But the bottom line is this is a great deal for the Titans. It's a 2-year deal, so it's not a 1-year deal. Jadeveon Clowney, for example, was a 1-year deal. Julio Jones only lasted 1 year. They cut him after 1 year. We'll see if Hopkins can make it 2 years. Hopefully he plays out this contract. But I think when you're looking at the value of it, especially the year-by-year numbers, the average annual value, Odell Beckham got a 1-year, $15 million deal, didn't even play football last year, coming off an ACL. I know Hopkins is getting up there in age and has had some injury issues the last couple seasons, but to get him for less money than what Odell Beckham signed, to get him for less than what Allen Lazard signed, I think this is a great deal for the Titans to come this late in the offseason, get that wide receiver that you need to bolster your offense. It's just a huge win for everyone, and apparently it was a much bigger offer than what the Patriots were willing to give Hopkins, which was the only other team involved in the bidding. So the Titans wanted him. I don't know why the Patriots were willing to pay, for example, Jonnu Smith so much money a few years ago, and they were not willing to pay Hopkins the same amount. But
didn't they just sign Devontae Parker to an extension that was like...
Well, they restructured
everyone
him.
balked at.
What they restructured him so that this year's cap hit would be lower, and everyone thought, oh, they're making space for Hopkins. And Matthew Judon even tweeted fake news when the news broke that Hopkins was signing with Tennessee. So the Patriots players were not happy. I don't know what the Patriots front office is doing, but the bottom line is Titans get a whole lot better. Don't have to spend a whole lot to do it. But again, we'll see how the cap hits shake out. Either way, they made it work just like we expected them to.
I have some thoughts on this contract, and I'm glad you bring up and ran through all the details. Number one, those incentives, the Titans would love to pay them, right? They would love to pay all $6 million in incentives. Because if he, 95 catches, 1,000+ yards, 10 touchdowns, they're hoping he reaches them. I would imagine they'd like to pay those incentives because on top of it, the not likely to be or not counting against the cap. I didn't know that, in all honesty, until you brought it up. That's such a shrewd loophole for the Titans. And you'd have to think, obviously, the way it was negotiated, structured, they knew, it looks back only at 1 year, which means it's not going to count towards the cap. That makes it such a shrewd loophole to give them an opportunity to earn more money without it damaging their cap. Because I promise you, and I see this all the time, for example, in the NHL, because I'm from Toronto, the Toronto Maple Leafs have so much money, but they're only allowed to spend up to the cap, right? Even though they've got so much damn money as an organization. The Adams family, Amy Adams, they ain't living paycheck to paycheck, right? The owners of the Titans. So, it's great. The biggest thing is it not counting towards the cap. If they got to pay out that money and they're able to do it without counting towards the cap as they will or would, that's a huge W. The last thought I have on this contract is as soon as the news came out that he signed with the Titans, and I'm not surprised because I understand what the national reputation is. Oh, everyone, oh my God, he chose money. They must have gave him a bag. Like, lesson learned, money always wins out. I think there's two ways to look at this. Look, by all accounts, we essentially have it confirmed that it was his largest financial offer. So you can say he chose money. That's fine. Like, if he chose money, he chose money. But that doesn't mean that it's a bad contract. Like, when the detail, like, 2 years, $26 million, especially looking at market value, what receivers are getting nowadays, like $13 million average annual salary per year. It's the second highest, as you mentioned, behind Odell Beckham. That was handed out this offseason by a team to a new player, an unrestricted free agency, right? Not counting extensions, yada, yada. But it's not by no means a bad deal. I mean, Allen Lazard got $11 million a year on a 4-year deal. Jacoby Myers got $11 million a year on a 3-year deal. Like, you know, the term is longer for those guys. They're younger players, as it should be. The Titans, appropriate, not given DeAndre Hopkins 3 or 4 years. I think 2 years is an appropriate timeline for him. But I do think giving him $2 million a year more than Allen Lazard or Jacoby Myers, who I should probably check the numbers, but I don't believe have 1,000-yard season under their belt. And if they do, they probably have one, and they probably just barely got. These are not 1,300-yard receivers. And even if they do, and I'm wrong, I can see your face. You're probably looking it up. But even if they do,
right now. Keep talking.
They don't have 7,000-yard seasons, right? Like DeAndre Hopkins does, right? Like, this is not.
Lazard does not have a 1,000-yard season. Keep going.
They didn't think so. Myers might have one. There was that 1 year where he emerged, but.
Keep talking.
Drum roll.
I'm almost there.
Drum roll.
Myers
please.
Does not have one either.
Boom. Justin Melo was correct. As always, neither player has 1,000-yard season under their belt. Yes, they're younger, but that's explained by the term. They got longer terms than he did. Giving DeAndre Hopkins, who has 7,000-yard seasons under his belt, something along those lines, giving him $2 million more a year in Jacoby Myers and what Allen Lazard got is by no means gives you free rate 6,000 yards. The 7th is coming this year, Graver. Think ahead for show some damn positivity. For them to give him $2 million a year more than what those guys got per year does not give you the right to hop on Twitter and say, oh my God, the Titans gave him a bag or desperation. Or look, again, you want to say he chose money? That's fair. It was the most lucrative offer he had. But you know what? I'm kind of stunned that that's the most lucrative offer he had, in all honesty, because I don't think it's an inappropriate offer from the Titans.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we're talking about a 3-time first-team All-Pro. That means that he was viewed by the people who cover the league as the best or one of the 2 best receivers in the entire NFL. 3 different years.
Absolutely.
And he was. Yeah, his last one was 2019, his last season in Houston, but that was also the last time he had Tim Kelly as his play caller, and that's, the main topic of today's podcast, aside from being totally derailed by DeAndre Hopkins signing, which we're very happy about, don't get me wrong. But the main topic is how Tim Kelly's offense is going to look. Well, now DeAndre Hopkins slots right in. He already knows Tim Kelly's offense. He's not going to have to learn the terminology and learn the playbook and learn the concepts, which is great. And one last note on the incentives, because it's pretty interesting to me where the floor for each category hit, the catches, the yards, the touchdowns. The lowest incentive he has to reach, catches, 65 catches for $250,000, is not likely to be earned because last season he had 64 catches. He was one shy. With the yards, it's 750 yards. He had 717 yards last year. So again, just missed it. And with the touchdowns, the lowest one is 4 touchdowns. How many do you think he had last year, Justin?
3.
He had 3 touchdowns last year. So it's pretty funny how it lined up. Yeah, you think that any of that's an accident? Of course not. The Titans are playing this cap game on purpose. And, Hopkins only played 9 games last year. He was suspended for 6 of them, but he missed a couple others with, I think it was a hamstring or something like that. Minor injury, not great. You don't want to hear that because coming off the Julio Jones experience, the hamstring basically is going to end his career if he even plays again this season. But the point is, he would have hit all of these incentives if he'd played even like 14 games. He would have at least hit the baseline incentive, let alone, 17 games, which you hope he can be on the field for 17 games for the Titans. But even if he can't, we sort of had this conversation with Julio. We sort of had this conversation with Clowney, which was like, as long as the Titans can win the division and this guy is healthy for the playoffs, that's when you need him. If he only plays 10 regular season games, and the Titans make the playoffs, that's fine as long as he's not missing week 18 wild card divisional round of the playoffs, right? So yes, there are some concerns that he may not be on the field. There are concerns that he doesn't practice, that he, is a Julio Jones type where he will not participate in most practices to save his body for the Sundays, which again, that's totally fine if he can build chemistry, if he knows the offense already. Those are not things that concern me, but I do think it's funny how they structured it to be like, not likely to be earned by one catch, by 33 yards, by one touchdown. It's like literally the minimum that it could possibly be.
That's incredible. And not that, look, I'm sure, Rand Carthon is more than capable of handling all that. But when you said that, one of the first things that came to my mind is I wonder how much, or if any, input was had by assistant general manager Chad Brinker, who Rand Carthon brought here from the Green Bay Packers. Because if you recall, when they brought Brinker here, they essentially said he knows the salary cap like the back of his hand. Like he was a money guy in Green Bay, essentially. So that was one of the first things that came to mind. I wonder if Brinker had any input on some of those incentives and the way they were structured with the tiers.
Right. The last thing I want to talk about here, on the last week's pod, we talked about offense X factors. And one of the things we said was the Titans should go sign George Fant, but they may wait until after the Hopkins stuff is finalized so that they know where their cap stands. Well, George Fant has been on Twitter, and I'm just going to read this whole interaction. It started with a Teron Davenport tweet, who basically was just talking about the deal here. He said, big deal for the Titans is now the offensive line. They'll need to figure out what works at right tackle while Nicholas Petit-Frere is out the first 6 weeks. George Fant makes the most sense from a free agency standpoint. And then some random follower of TD's, a fan of the Titans, tweeted, he tagged at George Fant74. You know damn well you want to be close to Bowling Green again, bro. Tennessee is calling your name. And George Fant replied, all they got to do is call, shrug emoji. All they got to do is call. The ball's in your court, Rand Carthon, Mike Vrabel, Titans brass. George Fant wants to be a Titan. All they got to do is call. Come on, man. Let's make this happen. What's going on here? Why hasn't it happened yet?
I'll get his number. From someone I know and pass it on.
Yeah, give me the phone. I'll make the call. Goodness sakes. We could get this money off Kickstarter for the Titans to pay George Fant. There's enough fans out there.
probably raised close to enough knowing this fan base. But I will say, I wonder how much of an impact, this is just a fun analysis to that side. Like a guy like George Fant, NFL players aren't dumb and they pay attention. Like he sees they signed DeAndre Hopkins. That excites him about potentially going to play for the Titans, right? He looks at it, he's like, damn, he knows they got a hole at right tackle. He's not dumb. He's waiting for an offer. He knows where potential suitors may emerge. He knows what happened with Petit-Frere. So what did I mention? That random follower of TD. I said on here, I go, he's got local ties to the community. He's not too far away. Well, that's where the Bowling Green things comes into play. He knows they signed DeAndre Hopkins. That's got to excite him. You're already seeing a bit of a domino effect. You know what I mean? Like that's a guy getting excited about an addition another team made, and he's saying, damn, I'd love to go play for that team as well.
Right. Okay, last thing I want to touch on before we get into what we were planning to do for today's episode.
And they really should. Sorry, but that's good. They really, really should. Like by far their best option would be George Fant.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. So I want to talk about DeAndre Hopkins' Twitter, because there's been a lot going on with his Twitter. People are saying, the Titans know they have a wide receiver one again because he tweets something crazy and then deletes it right away in reference to what A.J. Brown used to do.
I think that was our buddy Sean Calderon who tweeted. That was fantastic.
So Babs, whoever the heck Babs is, Babs on the mic, I believe he's a Patriots fan, but he tweeted, to be honest, I never wanted DeAndre Hopkins in the first place. The Patriots did the right thing. Do your homework on the free agents, but they knew Hopkins' time is winding down. He's going to be washed this season. He's heading to the Titans where careers go to pasture. Now, I will give him a little bit of credit because he replied to his own tweet and said sarcasm is a dying art, which might be why DeAndre Hopkins deleted his tweet because he didn't get the sarcasm. Remember this happened a little while ago to our buddy Easton Freeze, who tweeted about how Hopkins is so bad you can tell in this video that he doesn't have it anymore. And then it was like a highlight reel of all his plays. And he was like, wow, no one's getting the sarcasm. And Hopkins responded to that as well and deleted it because he realized that it was sarcasm. So maybe that's why Hopkins deleted the tweet.
By the way, sorry, because the highlights were amazing that Easton Freeze had tweeted out. Like they all looked really, really good, and yet no one put that together.
I know, right? But anyway, so Hopkins tweeted in response, quote tweeted Babs on the mic and said, "You was on my peanuts emoji. So you was on my nuts. See, athletes, this is why you shake hands with hand sanitizers. You was probably the same one talking bad about Tom when he left too," shaking my head. And then he deleted the tweet. So he's already out there deleting tweets, but he also tweeted something else, which I found great, which is, I always loved having haters and doubters, but I appreciate it even more now. Tighten up. Something surreal about seeing DeAndre Hopkins tweet tighten up after he spent most of his career with the Houston Texans.
It still hasn't fully registered to me, in all honesty. Like, and I know that makes me sound like a fan, but thinking back to that, because he always dominated the Titans. Like, there was nothing they could do they had no one that could cover him that entire time, really. Watching that guy dominate them for so long, I am having a hard time picturing him on the other side. And how great is it going to be to see him in a Houston Oilers throwback jersey?
Oh, that's going to be my favorite part. I said that yesterday on the emergency pod. I'll say it again. That is the moment I am waiting for most, to see him in those Oiler threads. And again, I'll say it like I said yesterday, I hope they wear them for the first time against the Houston Texans in Houston even. That would just be phenomenal. I finally want to address one other thing, which is all the national media people saying either, oh, Hopkins is going to go to Tennessee and waste the end of his career. Like, oh, I can't believe Hopkins took the money. He should have been going to a contender to chase a ring. Well, first of all, do you consider the Patriots a contender? Because they're the only other team in the mix. No,
they're not.
Someone else tweeted, it's wild that he chose Ryan Tannehill over Mac Jones. Mac Jones was essentially benched for a 7th-round rookie last year. Like, what are we talking about? Ryan Tannehill is so much more proven and just better than Mac Jones. Mac Jones has a chance to maybe one day be better than Tannehill, but are you kidding me? For the 2023 season, you're taking one quarterback. You're taking Mac Jones over Ryan Tannehill? Get out of here. And the final one that's just driving me absolutely crazy is all the people saying, oh, the Titans waited 1 year. They could have just paid A.J. Brown. Well, first of all, the guy who didn't pay A.J. Brown is not the same guy who paid DeAndre Hopkins. The guy who traded off A.J. Brown got fired for trading A.J. Brown. So there's no comparison here that they could have just paid A.J. Brown a year ago. Yeah, obviously they could have, and all Titans fans wish they did. But saying that, like, that's what they should have done instead of Hopkins, like, it doesn't even make sense. And then secondly, A.J. Brown signed a $100 million deal. DeAndre Hopkins signed a $26 million deal. I know that the term is different, but even if you extrapolate it out, it's still twice as much average annual value. It's 4 times as much actual value. Like, what are we talking? These people just drive me mad. And I'll say what I put in our group chat with the Broadway people today, that these people just wanted him to sign in Buffalo or Kansas City because that's what they all predicted months ago is where he would end up. That's what they all listed as the best possible landing spots. And they're just mad that they were wrong and that they don't get to see Hopkins playing with Josh Allen or playing with Patrick Mahomes. Like, sorry, that's not necessarily how it works. And just like take your stupid takes that don't make any sense, that have no logic behind them, and put them on some other platform like Threads that nobody's reading. Don't put them on Twitter where I have to see them. Anyway, if we were still doing Beef of the Week, that would be it for me.
Well, I mean, you summed it up. I don't have a ton to add there. I did tweet something this morning, and I stand by it, that essentially agrees with your last point, where it's like all these people calling him washed wouldn't be saying that if he signed with the Bills or the Chiefs. And I prefixed it by saying I understand analyzing Titans offense versus the Bills and the Chiefs. Those two teams are still going to have a better offense than the Titans. But that should have nothing to do with your evaluation of where DeAndre Hopkins is at in his career, right? That should be done by watching the 2022 tape, 2021 tape, whatever, and deciding what that player is. Not because he didn't go where you wanted him to go. Not because you're not going to be able to, clickbait, the Buffalo Bills are going to win the Super Bowl now. Kansas City Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl now. Again, you know what I mean. But that's what they wanted. I agree with you. And the one thing you didn't throw in there that drives me nuts is the comparisons to Randy Moss and Andre Johnson. That's the one that bothers me the most. I get why it's fun for narrative purposes, but there is under no circumstances, let me say, is DeAndre Hopkins at the same point in his career where Randy Moss and Andre Johnson were. Andre Johnson had already left Houston, played like 1 year with the Colts. It was very obvious he was a depth signing when they brought him here. Randy Moss played for 3 teams that year. The Titans weren't even his first team that season. He was cut from elsewhere. He was completely done. But I'll say this. You want to bring up the Julio Jones thing? I think that's fair. In all honesty, I do think that's fair because when Julio came here, we got to be honest, right? We did not think Julio was going to be completely washed. We did not think the injury thing, like I get comparing it to the Julio thing and worried it can go that way. Fair is fair. And in my opinion, that's fair. But Andre Johnson and Randy Moss, what were they, 34, 35? At least they were running like they were 34, 35 or older.
Moss was 33. Moss was 33, which is only 2 years older than Hopkins. But like you mentioned, he played for 3 teams that year. He was totally checked out. And he ended up retiring mid-season that year and didn't even play 2011. Came back for 2012. Yeah, exactly. Both of them retired midseason. So, yeah, well, I don't know what we're talking about.
We'll always have the
that stuff.
game-winning catch against the Detroit Lions, though, with Andre
Yes.
Johnson.
That was
We'll always
phenomenal. I mean,
have
worth
that.
signing him just for that catch, honestly.
It really was. I mean, they didn't pay him a lot, and that was a game winner on like 4th and 10, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, fourth and I think
4th and
it was
goal,
maybe. Yeah, and fourth and whatever it was. Yeah, I totally agree. So anyway, that's a lot about DeAndre Hopkins. We're talking for like 25 minutes here about DeAndre Hopkins. Our Tim Kelly episode was only going to be 25 minutes until we hopped on here to do this. So let's get into Tim Kelly now. Let's get into how the offense is going to look different. The first thing I'll say is hopefully it's better. But okay, sorry. Now let's get into this for real. I think some of the biggest changes we're going to see under this new offensive coordinator is all through the OTAs. What did we hear everyone say? We are going to play faster. They want to play faster. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to play with more tempo and more no huddle. It means that the players themselves are going to be able to think less and play more, get back to Mike Vrabel's mantra, know what to do and play fast and aggressive, right? And that all starts with the new terminology. So the biggest change to the offense is the terminology. They are not using the long play call, the wordy string of play calls that our West Coast offense is famous for, the Kyle Shanahan stuff that, Matt LaFleur implemented, that Arthur Smith picked up and carried on, that Todd Downing then carried on himself. No, this comes more from Tim Kelly's mentor, Bill O'Brien, that side of things, where the play calls are short and you have, a passing concept, a route concept, 2 or 3 man route concept boiled down into one word that can be then translated to multiple formations. It's not just like long string of play calls with one play call. And then if you can it, there's another long string of play calls where you basically don't have audibles. You just can the first play call and go into the second play call. No, with this new terminology, they can make audibles at the line of scrimmage. They can adjust route concepts with one word. And I think that's going to make a huge difference for the young guys in this offense who, while, yes, everyone has to learn new terminology, and that's always going to be, there might be some growing pains early in the season as they go through that. But the fact that the young guys aren't going to have to memorize 25-word play calls to know exactly what they're doing, and that, the concept words are going to carry from formation to formation, really simplifies things for all these young players, especially at the skill positions. And it's going to allow them to play fast and aggressive. And again, not necessarily play with tempo, but just play fast and know what they're doing and not have to stop to think, even as they come out of the huddle. I think that's going to be a huge, factor in allowing this offense to find more explosive plays this year.
Yeah, I think I like what you talked about them playing fast and everything, because that's been a theme. Like if you've watched some of the press conferences throughout OTAs, player meetings with the media, like Aaron Brewer got up there, talked about playing fast. Andre Dillard gets up there, talks about playing fast. We've heard it from Tajay Spears. We've heard it from Derrick Henry even. Like it's been a consistent theme with the players. And they're trying not to give away too much of this new playbook and this new approach, but they've all talked about the same thing. And when I think about that, and I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, because I say this in a good way, I wonder how much of this, like if it's a Tim Kelly system, it's the Tim Kelly system. But I wonder how much of that potential, to play fast is a result of the coaching staff being honest with one another, right? Like we know the supporting cast, this isn't as talented as the Cincinnati Bengals, right? This isn't as talented as the Buffalo Bills. We don't have a bunch of high-end starting playmakers at wide receiver, at tight end, at some of the, the skill positions. So how much of this is acknowledging that? And as coaches, because this staff doesn't make any excuses, what can we do, right, to make their life easier, to help them maybe be more productive? I wonder how much of this is a way of just placing your guys in advantageous positions, right? Finding a way to give them the upper hand pre-snap, right? Making their lives easier as opposed to the life of an opposing cornerback who's got to cover a play that's super long-winded and you got to think about it and yada, yada, yada. So I do wonder how much of this is to try to place these guys in advantageous positions.
And I'm glad you said that, because one of the things Tim Kelly talked about in the press conference during OTAs was about feeding your best players. And that's something that we haven't seen enough of. Even the brilliance of Arthur Smith. I mean, he fed Derrick Henry, no question about it. But when it comes to like designing targets for some of these pass catchers, whether it's, a go ball with a good matchup and no safety over the top, or just a guy getting the ball at the line of scrimmage with blockers in front to make people miss in space, I feel like we haven't seen enough of them just feeding a player. And I think the only real example I can think of in the last 5-ish years is the San Francisco 49ers game when A.J. Brown absolutely went off on Thursday Night Football. That was an example of them feeding their best player. Now, the difference here is that the Titans don't have an established best player other than Derrick Henry, and I'm sure they will feed Derrick Henry. But I think you're going to see design targets for Treylon Burks, design targets for Chigaquanko, and guys that they know can make plays in space, that can make people miss, that can beat their one-on-one matchups. Chigaquanko is going to get a lot of linebacker matchups. He's going to be faster than those guys. He's going to get a lot of nickel corner and safety matchups. He's going to be bigger and stronger than those guys. It's going to be interesting to see how they utilize these players. But I think one element of it is that they will, like you said, put these guys in the position to succeed, but make a point to get the ball to their best players and not have a passing concept where Ryan Tannehill is probably going to end up throwing to Nick Westbrook-Akina. Not that he won't do that, but in a sense, what I mean is there will be more plays in this offense that are designed to go to their best player. And I think we haven't seen enough of that. And that's going to help create more explosives as well.
I think that's a great point. And Charles London recently, he spoke at some assembly of sorts, and Zach Lyons is your go-to here, in all honesty. Our pal at F Words Pod, he wrote a good long-winded story on what Charles London talked about his offensive philosophy is, and I think Zach, delivered his takeaways on how that'll directly impact the Titans offense in 2023. And I believe a big speaking point that Coach London referred to, and if you're Coach London, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably know who he is. But in case you need a refresher, he's the quarterback's coach and passing game coordinator that they hired this year. Spent time with both Mike Vrabel and Tim Kelly in Houston, so they know him well. One of the talking points, same thing. He talked about getting the ball to your best players, right? Not overly complicating things. I love what you said there about Treylon Burks and Chigaquanko. Not only are their two best players, they're arguably their most athletic playmakers. They're terrific in space. We always talk about how they can make plays for themselves after the catch. And honestly, if things go as well as they can, you're hoping it gives you shades of what A.J. Brown and Jonnu Smith did for this offense upon a time, right? Because they were super physical after the catch. They were tough to tackle. You had to tackle them as a team, right? And you know exactly what I mean when I say that, right? One guy did not bring those guys down, right? And there's so many plays you can remember and reference when talking about what they did here in Tennessee. So that's the ceiling for them, right? That's what you want to see out of Treylon Burks and Chigaquanko this year. And I would like to think everything we've heard, everything we've seen, OTAs, minicamp, all that the Tim Kelly offense is going to get back to some of that in 2023.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And another big change that I expect to see this year is something that goes back a little bit to what Arthur Smith did more when he was in Tennessee. Under Arthur Smith in the 2020 season, according to Sharp Football Stats, the Titans ran the highest percentage of plays out of 12 personnel. 12 personnel means one running back, two tight ends. A lot of 12 personnel, which added a lot of flexibility to the offense and a lot of unpredictability in terms of pass versus run sets. Jonnu Smith obviously was a great two-way tight end, able to block, able to run routes and catch the ball. Now, the Titans have similar personnel in the tight end room and maybe even arguably better personnel in the tight end room. Under Todd Downing, the Titans did not run a lot of 12 personnel. Under Tim Kelly, the Houston Texans were top 5 in snaps and 12 personnel in 3 straight years under Tim Kelly. So Arthur Smith ran a lot of 12 personnel. Todd Downing comes along, they don't run a lot of 12 personnel. Well, Tim Kelly's history would tell you that he's going to run a lot of 12 personnel. And a lot of that depends on the players that you have in the room. Do you have guys? Do you have 2 tight ends that you want to have on the field for the majority of your snaps? Well, I think the Titans do now because you have Chigaquanko who can be that guy that goes, runs routes against linebackers and safeties and can block a little bit in the run game. I think he's got to be a little bit better, but he's going to improve, I think, going into his second year. And then you sign Trevon Wesco to take over your Jeff Swaim role. You hope he's an upgrade on that role. That's your blocking tight end who's going to be on the field for a lot of snaps. If they run a lot of 12 personnel, he's going to play a ton of snaps, and so is Chigaquanko. So finding a way to get both these guys on the field, I think we're going to see a shift back, to what we saw more under Arthur Smith with lots of 12 personnel out there, which will give the Titans the flexibility to be unpredictable, especially on first downs where, they ran the ball way too much on first down last year. So that's not a change that I'm predicting that they'll pass more on first down. It's a change I'm hoping for, but I'm predicting more 12 personnel.
I love that you brought that up, and you know what? You spoke a little too long there because you took the words right out of my mouth. You didn't let me an opportunity to say. When you think of Jonnu Smith and Michael Pruitt, you think of the overall profile, right, of the player, the buildup of that player. And I'd like to think you think a lot about Chigaquanko and Trevon Wesco, right, being that similar 1-2 punch. Tim Kelly loved 12 personnel in Houston. I think they went out and identified Trayvon Wesco, in my opinion, as a guy to kind of come in and play that role, to play that Jeff Swaim role, obviously, as a block first tight end. I think you're going to see a lot more 12 personnel this year. And in all honesty, one thing you didn't mention there, at least you left this point to me, is it's going to help the O-line as well, right? Because we got a lot of questions up front, with a new left tackle in Andre Dillard, a guy that's been injury prone, a rookie starter at left guard in Peter Skoronski, the disaster that's the suspension at right tackle for Nicholas Petit-Friere. These guys are going to, at times, can play as an extension, right, of the offensive line. And Trayvon Wesco especially, I imagine, is going to do a lot of helping, whether that's on the left side or the right side. Playing with 12 personnel is going to help this O-line hopefully pass protect better than the 2021 iteration did. Or sorry, the 2022 iteration. Probably both, actually. Now
yeah, both for sure. Both. Yeah, no, I agree with that too. And I think, there's an argument to be made that running more 12 personnel can actually hurt your running game if you bring more defenders into the box because you're in a heavy formation and the blockers you have aren't capable of blocking the defenders that you invite into the box, versus if you spread everything out, you run 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers, 1 back, 1 tight end, you spread these guys out, you spread out the defense, you can open a little bit more holes. I kind of do tend to side with that, but I think it also, again, depends on the players themselves and how capable they are as blockers. So right. I think we'll see more 12 personnel. I don't necessarily know if it's a good thing. I think it will end up being a good thing because I think Trayvon Wesco is an above average blocker at tight end. So I think they're not going to suffer too much in the run game from running all this 12 personnel when, there's a lot of people that argue you should spread out a team to run them. And I think that, there's more football minds leaning in that direction now than there were even 2, 3, 5 years ago. So that'll be an interesting debate that we'll have throughout the season is, when the Titans offense is struggling, which, they're not going to be great every game, even if they're above average offense. That's a conversation we'll have throughout the year, I think. But for the most part, I think you can safely assume they will run more 12 personnel. The question is just, is that a good thing?
And how much of it will they run, right? I think that's another question. I want to add, if that is the case and you invite more defenders into the box, all that yada, yada. The one thing I'll say, and this is maybe an old school mentality, but the onus is on you, right? More likely, more often than not, you're going to have a hat on a hat, right?
Yeah. When
you got that 12 personnel out there. So if things don't go well, that's because you didn't execute your assignment, right? You didn't block a guy you're supposed to block. You lost the one-on-one matchup. So to me, that's one, it's a potential positive and a potential negative, but it's still, I always get in. I said this a lot last year, I think, during the year as well. You want to blame the scheme. You want to blame the play calling, yada, yada. There's room for that. But if you've got a hat on a hat and you didn't block well, you didn't execute your assignment well, that falls back on you.
Yeah, I agree. And last thing I want to say about Tim Kelly here, I just teased a second ago that I hope they're going to pass more. We don't know that they're going to pass more, especially on first down, but you would think now that they have DeAndre Hopkins, that would be part of the plan. Mike Herndon, Mike Miracles, Mike NFL, whatever his Twitter handle is, Mike Herndon NFL, tweeted something either today or yesterday, whenever he tweeted it. He said something like, this signing gives me even more hope that the Titans will move to opening up the offense to a bigger passing attack. Not necessarily pass dominant, but not so run dominant, because why would you go out and sign these offensive linemen who are more suited in pass protection than they are in run blocking? Why would you go out and add DeAndre Hopkins for $13 million a year instead of just signing, one of the bargain bin receivers that was left over if you were not planning to open up your offense and throw the ball a little more earlier and more often? So I hope that is another change we will see. Again, we don't know that. We can't say based on his past experience that will be different. I mean, he's never had Derrick Henry before, right? So maybe there'll still be a ground and pound run dominant offense, but I think we're going to see a lot more early down passing than we've seen, and that would be a huge welcome change for this team. Otherwise, why would you go sign DeAndre Hopkins? And when you have them in the 2 tight end sets, it's going to be Hopkins and Burks out there. We're going to see that a lot. Hopkins can also play in the slot, so maybe we won't see as many 2 tight end sets as we saw when Tim Kelly was in Houston. Like we talked about a few minutes ago, seeing more 2 tight end sets. Anyway, I'm just saying, pass the ball more. Now that you have Hopkins, that's the best way to go.
Well, you hope the pass pro can hold up, right? I think that's the real question. But I do agree that you look at the linemen they went to go get in free agency. We've talked about this, and I don't think it's an accident or a coincidence that we're making too much of. Daniel Brunskill, for his career, is always graded out as a better pass protector than run blocker. Same thing for Andre Dillard. And if you studied Peter Skoronski at Northwestern like I did, I mean, I thought he was really good in both, I'll be honest, but I think it's the pass pro that gets him drafted as early as it did because he's so athletic. He's so smooth. His feet are incredible. He's so technically advanced. And remember, he was playing left tackle at Northwestern. So you really got to see that pass pro shine as he protected the blind side of the quarterback. So I think all three of those new starters up front insinuate that they went after guys that are pass pro first guys as opposed to being dominant road grading mauler run blockers. Now we'll see, at center, Aaron Brewer, run blocking has been his strength. And then at right tackle, we'll see what happens. But specifically with Brunskill, Dillard, and Skoronski, I do think they're better pass protectors. And then, as you said, you go out and get DeAndre Hopkins, you pay him what you pay him. You've invested some draft capital elsewhere, of course, with Traylon Burks, and you bring in an offensive coordinator, Tim Kelly, that really fed DeAndre Hopkins as a target hog when he was calling plays in Houston alongside him. So I do agree with everything you're saying, and I think certainly you hope that the pass pro doesn't derail that plan, but I do think they're hoping to be a bit more balanced offensively than they've been.
But what's interesting to note is that in Tim Kelly's role with the Titans last year, he was in charge of a few things. He was in charge of early down passing and the red zone. So the red zone last year, the Titans were incredible. They scored 94% in goal to go situations. They scored a touchdown 94% of times, thanks to Sharp Football Stats for that one. That was number one in the NFL, and that is an insanely efficient number. And a part of that is having Derrick Henry. A guy like Derrick Henry is really good in the red zone, really good inside the 10-yard line, goal to go situations. And as much games as Ryan Tannehill missed last year, he's also a guy that is a threat to score with his legs. We've seen that read option thing work so well in Tennessee when, they're 3rd and 4 or 3rd and goal from the 3 or whatever the situation is. And Tannehill, reads the defense, doesn't hand it to Henry and keeps it himself. Or if the blocking is there and the defensive ends are in the right place, he gives it to Henry, who scores a touchdown. So I think we're going to see a continuation of that. Tim Kelly, was designing the red zone plays last year and designing the early down passing plays. So does that mean the Titans will call more early down passing plays, or was Tim Kelly just designing them? Will they call more play action on first down? That is, I think, an area that they need to exploit because we saw how good Ryan Tannehill was off play action, especially early down play action under Arthur Smith, before the last 2 seasons under Todd Downing. They got away from that a bit the last 2 years, especially last year. They were the run heaviest team on first down last year. They got to back off of that a little bit and be more unpredictable. I think we are going to see some of that with Tim Kelly. And something I mentioned on our last podcast talking about offensive X factors, Tim Kelly in the 2020 season, when he had Deshaun Watson as his quarterback with the Houston Texans, Watson led the NFL in average yards per pass attempt at 8.9 and average yards per pass completion at 12.6 that season. So when the Titans do pass, especially off play action, look for these targets to be a little bit further down the field as they, look to take the top off a defense, stretch a defense vertically. We didn't see near enough times last year where the Titans tried to go deep with the ball. I remember a handful of plays where they actually went deep with the ball, and Traylon Burks has the ability, even if he's not like a true burner in the classic sense of being a speedster deep threat. He's a guy that can make contested catches downfield, that can go up and climb the ladder and get the ball on big plays downfield. We saw it against Green Bay. We saw it against Philadelphia with some really nice downfield catches. So I'm hoping, more or less hoping than predicting. The early part of this pod was predicting. Now I'm into hoping that the Titans will pass the ball more early and pass it further down the field, because I think that they need to find more explosive plays than they had last year. And I think that's a big reason why Tim Kelly was promoted to offensive coordinator and Todd Downing was let go.
Well, that's a given. They need more passing plays, more explosive passing plays. They got to generate a lot more of those. So I'm not going to say too much about it. It's so obvious. Didn't Tim Kelly call all the good plays last year and Todd Downing called the bad ones?
Yeah, that was a common refrain from Titans fans. If something
That's what I
worked,
remember. Can I switch to our top? Not, we're talking about Tim Kelly in the offense here, but one thing, and I don't even know if you have an opinion on this. So if you don't, just cut this out and we'll pretend like it never happened. They've been outside zone heavy, right? Since Mike Vrabel became the head coach. Tim Kelly hasn't been an outside zone heavy guy. At least he wasn't in Houston. And that's not the Bill O'Brien offensive philosophy. So if we're operating under the assumption that Tim Kelly's sort of a student of the Bill O'Brien offense, which he is, in my opinion, how much is that going to change in 2023?
That's a great question. I think, all offseason, we've heard the coaches talking whenever they have a chance to speak to media about saying, like, we're going to not stop doing what was working for us. And we had a lot of things that were working. We're just going to work to improve the things that weren't working and add new elements and new concepts. So I think one of the things that was working at least the last few seasons since Derrick Henry's been a Tennessee Titan, is the run game. And how much change are they going to put into the run game, knowing that Derrick Henry is a great outside zone runner, inside zone runner as well. The zone running scheme in general, Derrick Henry excels in. I think he can excel in a gap scheme or a power scheme as, just as well. I think there will be a little bit more mixing it up when it comes to the run game, again, to be less predictable, because one of the biggest issues with this Titans team last year was they just became too predictable situationally and otherwise. So I think we're still going to see a decent amount of the zone concepts in the run game, probably more than Tim Kelly would have called if Mike Vrabel wasn't the head coach, if he wasn't in Tennessee with Derrick Henry, with a team that's been running those concepts for years than otherwise. But I think, we're also going to see him mix in some of the gap and power stuff that he did a lot in Houston.
If I had to make a bold prediction about the run game, I don't know how bold this is, but at the end of the year, when all these analytics come out and Sharp Football releases his numbers and everything else, I bet they'll have run the least amount of outside zone plays than they have since Mike Vrabel arrived.
I can buy that prediction. I like that one. All right. Anything else about what we could see from this offense before we wrap up this episode?
No, I'm excited to get into training camp, man. It's coming up just in a few days here. Really. Hopefully I would like to think we're going to get more of an in-depth look, right? I know some reporters were at OTAs and mini camp, but with those training camp practices open, they'll be practicing against other teams, right? I think the New England Patriots and Minnesota Vikings are on the schedule for joint practices as well as the preseason. I think we're going to find out a bit more of this Tim Kelly offense here at training camp. Probably find out more during training camp than we will in the preseason.
Yeah, I'm excited for training camp and preseason. I'm excited for preseason because I want to see these quarterbacks take snaps behind, in a real live game situation.
But it'll be bland is what I'm getting at, right? Like from an offensive perspective. You'll probably learn more at training camp.
That's true. So we're going to have to pay close attention to these reports here when training camp starts and try to learn what we can about Tim Kelly's new offense before the season gets here. Last thing I'll say is hopefully they can pick it up quickly, because a lot of times you see guys trying to learn a new offense. There are growing pains to start the season, and they can't get off to a slow start because I think, with the first 6 games without having your starting right tackle out there, they're going to have to be able to make up for it in other areas. And getting off to a slow start combined with not having your right tackle would be disastrous, I think.
Well, forget the right tackle thing. In all honesty, I think the number one point that comes to mind for me when you say that is, and this is just the honest truth, they don't have enough individual talent to be able to overcome not picking up the offense quickly.
Right. No, I agree with that too. So yeah, they got to pick it up. Hopefully Tim Kelly is a genius and the Titans offense looks great this year, because otherwise, the defense was fine last year, but the reason they weren't winning as many games as they could have was definitely on the shoulders of the offense. And we'll see if that can change this season. If Ryan Tannehill can stay healthy, if Will Levis or Malik Willis get pressed into action, I don't know. I think you just button up the season and go for Caleb Williams or Marvin Harrison Jr. next year. All right. That'll do it for this. Thank you all for listening to this podcast. If you are just listening, though, go to YouTube. How many times I got to say it? Like, come on, you're still on the pod. You're still in Apple Podcasts or Spotify after all the times that we've said, go to YouTube. Anyway, head to the YouTube channel, subscribe, please, to our channel. We have all kinds of videos coming out, picking our award winners. Who's going to win MVP? Who's going to win Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year on offense, Rookie of the Year on defense, Coach of the Year. We're picking all of them. We got 2 more of those videos coming out later this week. So stay tuned to the YouTube channel. Those will not be podcasts. Those are just YouTube clips. So go watch us on YouTube at the Music City Audible podcast.
Wanted to quickly plug the interview series before we get out of here. Perfect timing, I think. Titans fans are really excited to read about Titans football again. By the time this episode drops, the Roger McCreary interview, that was the first one, the debut interview for my new Titans player interview series, is now on BroadwaySportsMedia.com. Early access for Broadway insiders. You need a membership. The first, I'm proud to announce, the first of 11 interviews with current Titans players that will be dropping. That was Roger McCreary. There are 10 more coming. Some of them are back-end roster guys fighting for roster spots. But in all honesty, I always really enjoy getting fresh perspective from a guy that just got there or a guy that's on the roster bubble. So it's actually, I think I got a nice mixture. I don't want to reveal all of the names, but There's at least one other defensive starter that's part of this interview series. There are a couple of guys that are fighting for back end spots. There's a nice healthy mix, I think. You got your Roger McCreary's, you got one or two other starters. You got some depth pieces that I think are definitely going to make the team. And then you got a new signing to the team I got with as well, first year with Titans. And then there are a couple of guys that have been there that were there last year. And even the year before that are fighting for a roster spot. So I think and I love hearing from those guys and their perspective as they enter training camp, which I think opens on the 25th. This interview series is starting now on the 17th. God, it's going to run all the way till maybe the 31st. Like I said, there's 11 of them. McCreary's the first. So if you've read the McCreary one, there are 10 more coming, and they're going to be coming at you daily. Every single day, we're dropping a new one on Broadway Sports. I've got the whole schedule mapped out. I'm on vacation right now. I wanted it to feel like I wasn't on vacation. You guys are always so supportive of us and the work we do. So I'm going to be hopefully on the beach, sightseeing. I'll be in Europe, and these interviews will be dropping every single day.
Nice. Yeah, so make sure you're on BroadwaySportsMedia.com, a Broadway insider, so you get first access to all that stuff. That's going to be great. We're all looking forward to it. Thanks, Justin. All right, that will do it again for this episode. I'll be back next week. Justin won't be here. He's still going to be on vacation, but I'll be back again. I don't know. Maybe it'll be me. Maybe I'll get somebody from Broadway to join me, and we'll talk through the beginning of training camp, which is coming very, very soon. Starts this weekend, I think everyone reports, and then practices start early next week. So it'll be great to, see Hopkins on the field with this team and see how much participation he gets and see how his chemistry with Ryan Tannehill develops. Anyway, we're looking forward to all that, but we will be back next week, or at least the podcast will be back next week. We got constant stuff dropping on the YouTube feed, so make sure you're tuned into the YouTube channel, subscribe there, the Music City Audible podcast on YouTube. We're really trying to grow that, so if you're just listening to this, please go to YouTube and watch it. Please go watch our emergency reaction to DeAndre Hopkins and just leave a comment, any comment. You can just leave the letter Y 100 times. Like, any comment helps because it helps the algorithm and all that nonsense. So anyway,
leave a goat emoji. Just leave a goat emoji for
DeAndre. Yeah, leave a goat emoji, or tell us your prediction for Hopkins stats this year, or whatever. Just drop a comment, please. We're begging for comments. Okay, sorry. Didn't mean to get mad at you. We appreciate everyone. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week. Until then, y'all stay safe out there and tighten up.
A Broadway Sports Media production.